Can you? My stomach slowly ate itself as I looked into Haze's eyes, but only saw the crawling blackness that surrounded the dog. Can you talk? Haze remained frozen, eyes showing no signs of recognition. I let the silence drag for a few more seconds before slowly starting up the projector again. The next shot had metal prongs hooked up between the cadaver and a large battery. A limiter bridged the gap. Thomas carefully flipped a switch, the corpse remaining utterly still as its eyes gradually bubbled and blackened. The camera focused on the black creature as it winced in the cage and gritted its teeth. The footage cut. The same prongs were now inserted into the creature's cage as the corpse sat alone. The switch was again flipped, the creature distorting the footage wildly as it writhed. The corpse, in turn, seemed to be experiencing agony as well, twisting against its restraints. Can you speak? I returned to Haze as I left the projector running, now having to stand and physically back up. She was getting so close. A faint trail of blood led from her original position. Her eyes narrowed, the most movement I had seen in a while. Her teeth peeled into view, silver irises sizzling behind dead corneas. I was now limited by the length of the cord, the projector protesting against backing away any further. I was going to have to deal with Haze sooner rather than later. That's when the projector flickered violently, splicing through a huge variety of tests in a fraction of a second, as if each was only given a single frame. Finally, it settled back on the dark basement, the corpse now scattered apart, a chainsaw having been taken to it in an effort to destroy it. A canister of kerosene also lay in the corner, the entire basement looking as if it had been torched. The creature was still very much alive, again having nearly doubled in size. Its fur now bristled out of the tiny cage that seemed to continuously shock it. The plexiglass had been melted away by the fire, splotches of kerosene littering the floor around the entire enclosure. The creature's fur was wet with it. I flinched as a ghost suddenly approached from off-screen. I quickly realized, however, that it wasn't a ghost at all. Just the decrepit, horrendous remains of what was left of Thomas. At this point, it was impossible to tell if the dog was still poisoning him, or the only thing keeping him alive. His hands held the experiment clapper, scribbled writing long since having been abandoned and written over countless times without erasing. The last thing I could clearly make out was, "Killing the stick sound. Take 305. Thomas clacked open the same Zippo lighter from before, igniting it with his thumb before throwing it into the cage. The footage split apart as if filming a black hole. Light warped in frightening patterns as Thomas crouched to the ground, covering his ears. Haze's dull eyes watched this, reflecting the sickly yellow light of the projector as it switched to yet another test, again attempting to kill the dog, without success. This happened for several minutes of footage, Haze's eyes remaining emotionless as the dog silently howled on the footage again and again, clawing at the bars in agony. But it never died, was never even injured. I suddenly heard another sound beside me, Haze now such a regular shape in my peripheries that I didn't even realize it was her at first. A slow, gammy hiss bubbled from her lips as she looked to be breathing out tar. Finally, her vocal cords shuddered with a viscid speckle of blood. The sounds contorted out, Haze remaining otherwise motionless. "What?" I nervously replied, looking for a potential weapon. What are you saying?" Haze's eyes shivered behind blackness, frantically trying to piece together sounds. I dropped my guard. I don't understand what you're... The trick was so convincing I failed to notice how close she had snuck with her charade, a flash of silver letting me know far too late that she had been hiding another knife. The top spindle shattered, Haze immediately twisting the blade and throwing the entire mangled projector to the ground. It made a hideous grinding noise, footage partially unspooling as the reel speed snapped in half, projecting through a cracked lens. The frame slowly churned past at less than 2 frames a second, the spent footage scurrying across the floor. Haze's eyes widened in horror, foot immediately heaving up to crack downwards against the sputtering machine. I desperately kicked as well, just barely able to nudge the projector out of the way before her foot slashed down with supernatural strength, denting a crater in the concrete floor. Haze hissed venomously, lifting her foot again. I tried to kick the projector further away, but was immediately cut off as she pivoted to me instead. My ankle snapped against the ground with a splash of rusted red. Haze had fear in her eyes like nothing I had ever seen. On the frame, Thomas held a landline phone in his hand, though the cord seemingly stemmed from nowhere. His eyes were red and filled with resignation. His mouth moved slowly, a bottle of what appeared to be sulfuric acid swinging softly in his hand. The cap was off, his fingers holding it like a drink. The call had just finished up, Thomas hanging his head and bringing up the chemical cocktail to his lips. As he did so, he turned, yanking the phone slightly to reveal that the cord extended not from nowhere, but from the drywall. My eyes narrowed on this. Haze again lifted up her foot to smash the device. The footage jumped ahead, Thomas simply gone. It was unclear how much time had passed or where he had disappeared to. Then 2 things happened. The burned corpse left alone in the room began to twitch, charred hands softly inching toward the cage battery. And the hatch above it opened, the footage glitching into darkness before violently shaking back to reveal something that made my heart stop. In the frame, I watched my own eyes reflecting back at me, wide with terror. Sylvia stood beside me. My skin paled, world clawing its way back into darkness as the memory crashed down like rolling water. Oh yeah, you think so? I sat with my ruffled uniform outside the manor. A pleasant spring sky radiated overhead, a dry breeze skirting along the grass beneath the wooden table I sprawled across. Oh, sure. Sylvia shrugged to her plate, hot dog lying untouched as ketchup began to sully the bread. Her legs were tucked beneath her on the ground, pale skin shimmering in the sun. All right then. I slowly looked down at my own hot dog, grin widening. 3, 2, 1, now! I shoved the hot dog in my face as Sylvia did the same. We scarfed them down as fast as we could. Oh, John, come on. Aunt Cheryl did a double take as she bustled past. Is everything a competition with you two? Dan worked hard on those, you know? The least you could do is slow down a little bit. Done! Royce pumped his fist with a muffled shout before swallowing hard and standing proudly between Sylvia and I. Oh, for Pete's sake. Aunt Cheryl rolled her eyes and promptly walked over to a small crowd around a large grill. Several smaller kids ran circles around the nearby tables, warm chatter permeating the air. Adults congregated in various small groups, a game of horseshoes resulting in several bursts of laughter exploding out. Oh, damn you. I frowned at Royce through a full mouth, swinging my legs off the table before finally swallowing. Where did you come from? Workshop. He snagged a fry off my plate and dipped it in Sylvia's ketchup. Poked my head up for some food. Some of us don't get a fun barbecue break today like you slackers. Yes, you do. Sylvia swerved her plate away as he attempted to double dip. You just don't want to talk to anyone. Spend all day in that dumb workshop. Rightio! Royce winked, quickly snatching the entire plate from her. And since I had to show you two up, now I have to talk to them again to get more food that I can actually, eat at a normal pace. Look what you've done. What are you working on down there? I mumbled, finally finishing up the hot dog and sitting back. We've barely seen you recently. You're welcome, he grinned. Nah, fixing up that, cabinet from 32, tinkering with that old gramophone, and Cheryl has me investigating that smoke. And I almost called the fire department last night. Oh yeah, wait, you saw that too? I paused. Where did that come from? Sylvia and I couldn't see our own hands in front of our faces in the kitchen. It smelled like something was burning. Cheryl was losing it. We figured it was you. Sylvia looked at Royce skeptically. Like all the other times. Just twice. Royce folded his arms. And I put those out just fine, so... eventually. Wasn't me this time, but seemed to stop just as soon as it started. Not sure where it came from. Wasn't too bad where I was. Definitely pretty bad in the kitchen, I reiterated. But it did let up pretty quick. That's bizarre. Maybe the water heater or something? What's below the kitchen? Nothing, Royce shrugged. Foundation and bedrock. Nothing in the housing plan. Definitely not the heater. I've been looking into it though. You don't know the half of Cheryl's freakouts. I stole a glance at Sylvia, our eyes meeting for an extended period of time. But your workshop is below the first floor. I tried to casually press the matter. Why is it just bedrock below the kitchen? Did I design the dumb house? Royce shrugged. I don't know. It's uneven terrain around here. Nothing below the ballroom or lobby either. This place makes no damn sense. Why do you ask? Well, no reason, I guess. I paused. Just curious. Well, if you find something, let me know. He laughed, snagging one more fry before beginning to back up towards the grill. Catch you later, little dudes. Can't spend too much time slacking off. Plenty of time to steal plates. Sylvia frowned to herself, standing up and dusting off her uniform skirt. When Royce was finally out of earshot, our eyes again met, a spark of energy softly sizzling in the air. Dude, I half whispered, checking around myself. Even he doesn't know. This is some secret shit. Sylvia nodded, shoving me aside to sit on the table next to me. Maybe our clones are down there, or that Dharma clock thing from Lost. The smoke definitely came up from the floorboards, I thought with my head down. And remember Mark complaining about closing up the kitchen last week? Nope. Sylvia shook her head, grabbing a fry. How many secret rooms do you think are even in this place? Maybe the piano in the lobby, rotates a bookshelf or some shit. Definitely, I gestured. Seriously, this place was built by only the highest of architects. But anyway, he complained about hearing weird noises, beneath his feet. You don't remember that? Creeped him out. Mark creeps me out, Sylvia shrugged. But I've heard stuff too, man. And there's no way I misplaced the kitchen key so many times. Okay, I don't think you can pass that one off, I sneered. Shut it, she snapped back. I'm serious. Talking about weird shit in the kitchen is... Margaret really dumb enough to miscount that many apples in the shipment? She's dumb, but, shit's been awry for a while in there. So, you think some homeless man is living under the kitchen stealing food at night? I laughed. Sounds like a pretty... John! A smaller voice suddenly rushed up, the chubbiest kid of the bunch suddenly latching onto my legs with fits of laughter. John, help! Another kid rushed up, finger extended to clearly tag the shit out of this hapless victim as he wove between my legs and under the table. Giggles exploded out, laughter escaping my own throat as I lifted up my legs and watched them escape out the other end of the table. Run, Beck, run! I laughed. You got this, bro! I turned back to see Sylvia pouting. Oh, so he knows your name. She folded her arms. That's cool. Real cool. What's that, Selena? I raised an eyebrow. Kids don't like you? Oh, it'll be alright. That only makes you a total monster. Half of them are freaking scared of me. She grew darker, eyes narrowing. How is that fair? I do nothing but show unending support and affection. My eyes drifted back to the kids then, following them as I suddenly bumped into a tall, slender girl with one hand on her hip. She was cocked as if in a model pose, liquid spilling from her glass. Her dress was more skin than fabric, both way over yet ironically underdressed for the event. My heart tightened, stomach giving a flutter. Oh God. Haze. I had successfully avoided her since our first meeting at the rally 2 days ago. I had been grateful for that, her very presence so intimidating I couldn't imagine getting one word out to her. And yet, despite all of that, some part of me still held on to a fantasy where Sylvia shoved my head down with a loud thump. I flailed and readjusted to see her green eyes boiling with intensity. You always this creepy, she hissed. What the hell are you staring at? Nowhere, nothing. I shook my head, turning away, but unable to keep my eyes off the scene as Beck quickly apologized to her in the sheepish way only kids can. Haze looked down to her dress, grip tightening before her face slowly contorted into a ghastly, forced smile. I felt the air chill even from where I was sitting. No, I get it, she cooed, sinking down to get eye level with Beck, hand creeping onto his shoulder. I'm a bit too tall to see, huh? Her eyes slivered into sickles as Beck nodded hastily, fear creeping into his eyes. Haze flicked up her gaze to see if anyone was watching. I hastily turned away, smiling awkwardly to Sylvia. So, I could immediately tell she was onto me, my words now digging my own grave. What's the deal with this weather, right? Sylvia was unimpressed. Go near that witch and I'll slit your fucking throat, she hissed. She has enough degenerates following her around. You're better than... Beck let out a cry, Sylvia and I swiveling to see him face down in the dirt, drenched in whatever liquid had been in Haze's cup. Haze immediately bent down in horror, brushing hair out of her eyes as she lifted him up and dusted him off. What happened? His mom was the first over, overwhelming concern on her face. Sylvia and I stood up as well. Poor thing ran into me, must have tripped. Haze shook her head, barely able to hold in her twisted grin, as Beck's tiny eyes flashed to her in betrayal. I'm so sorry, I feel terrible. No, we're so sorry. His mom quickly picked him up and began carrying him away. My God, I'm so sorry, thank you for helping, sorry. I stared in astonishment, gawking. Had Haze just... something so petty? That's when I noticed the way she listed ever so slowly from side to side, barely overheard Beck complaining about nail polish remover in the drink on him, and saw the faintest glint of metal poking out from Haze's purse. A flask? It was 11:30 in the morning. Just how drunk was she? My heart sank into the depths, blood chilling. Perhaps I had misjudged her more than just a little bit. I couldn't look as she laughed fakely, resting her hand on a suited man's chest. They all nervously looked away as well as she pulled out the flask and refilled her drink. So anyway, that aside, I tried to slowly recollect myself, hopping down from the table and looking to Sylvia before lowering my voice into conspiratorial territory. We doing this or what? What? Her emotions reset, body sitting upright and turning to me. Oh, wait, now? Wind rustled beneath my feet. The first slivers of gray were beginning to crawl over the horizon, the scent of rain still a few hours off. The hatch, I nodded, looking over my shoulder to the manor. Don't think we'll get a better time when no one else is in the kitchen. I mean, maybe the thing that's just unlocked. It sure as hell is hidden well enough. Never know if you don't try. Sylvia took a second to blink before feigning a clearly interested disinterest. Sure, why not then? She hopped down as well. That was the last time I saw her smile. The frames before my eyes sputtered and frayed, Haze's teeth gnashing as the footage peeled back layers of memories like acid on flesh. The projector screamed in agony, seconds from death. That's when Haze's foot stopped, tears in her bloodshot silver eyes. She appeared to grapple with an invisible force holding her back. Her foot stomped into the ground inches from the projector at half the strength of before. I struggled to get up with my mangled foot before Haze suddenly staggered violently, intentionally slamming her entire head into the wall. I flinched back as gore splattered the floor, Haze falling partially limp and crumpling backwards onto herself. Back in the footage, Sylvia and I had entered the hatch. Sylvia was bent back in horror, terrified eyes starched on the floor as a flashlight beam illuminated the space. My mind fought and writhed, tearing between reality and memory. Oh fuck. Sylvia was rapidly hyperventilating, words dissolving to dry heaves as the fumes of decomposition and rot were fully realized. Light painted smoldering chunks of flesh at our feet. What the hell? I felt terror flooding my veins. My flashlight beam slowly swept across the room, glistening back from wet slops of matter against the walls. The stench we had attributed to sewage or decaying wood was very quickly proven wrong. Flies buzzed like a dense fog coating every surface. Something had died down here. Several somethings. Fuck, get back up. I slowly put my arm in front of Sylvia, shoving both of us back. Fucking Christ, move! Sylvia didn't need any direction, scrambling towards the ladder only to freeze solid as something else slithered from the darkness in front of us. A low growl. My heart clammed up immediately, shaking hand moving to see the flashlight beam cast bars across the room. The cage was bursting at the seams with fur, blurring teeth immediately snapping at the metal the minute its eyes constricted in the light. Then a click. A severed, badly charred hand fell limp, wires silently listing to the floor around the cage. The faint electrical buzzing in the air cut to utter silence. Sylvia and I were paralyzed with fear, muscles physically held captive by the horrific image of the cage, slowly peeling apart. Metal grated and warped, tendrils of blackness slithering across the floor and up the walls. Back in reality, I watched Haze writhe on the floor in front of the very same cage. Her skull slowly pieced itself together despite her continuing to bash it against the ground. Her fingers bent back against the floor as her fingernails peeled away, but the memories didn't stop. Sylvia and I exploded outside, Royce's face the first I saw as his lanky form towered above everyone else. Fucking run! The words exploded through my head, but the air just wasn't there to push them out. Run. Instead, dead silence thundered in the air as faces turned to us in slow motion, melting as if held to candle flames, their features stretched and contorted into nightmarish displays of terror. The gray clouds on the horizon were now jet black, extending in a suffocating dome overhead. Chilling wind whispered through crooked trees, rain streaking down from overhead. But the blackness behind us rivaled the foulest of weather. Not a single innocent figure blinking or taking a breath as we clawed our way past them. Tears welled in our eyes, rolling down the faces of those frozen as well. The collective feeling of sudden and inevitable dread, a palpable force that drowned out the screams the minute they started. The Goliath creature threw its head back to let 2 children slide down its gullet without a bite taken. It bowled over limp victims as they fled, claws raking their pale flesh to ribbons. Royce held a hot dog in his hand, pinprick eyes staring in disbelief at the black tidal wave growing ever closer. Fur, saliva, and blood sullied the ground, rivers glistening in the clouded sun as the manor fell away into darkness. I blinked. Royce was torn in half, entrails slinging what was left of his lower half into a pile that crawled with several others screaming and clinging to life as their bodies fell apart in front of them. Vomit and bile torn from exposed stomachs audibly sizzled on the ground and on those beside them. I spun around to find that Sylvia was no longer with me, my eyes instead landing on Cheryl hitting the floor as her legs landed some ways away. Her face was twisted and unrecognizable, blood-curdling scream cut off as jaws clamped around her skull. Flesh stretched and tore like putty as the creature mashed it to pieces, chewing with an open mouth. Suddenly, a voice. "John?" Sylvia's eyes stared directly at me. A look I had promised myself I would never forget, forever carved into her face. But it was far away. She was far away. Her leg lay twisted behind her, crippled form lying close enough to the fray to allow blood to speckle her uniform like rain. "John." The creature bowled towards her, snapping up people in its path with earth-shattering screams. I didn't move. Didn't move to help her, didn't move away, I just stared. She just stared back at me. I wasn't going to survive, no one was. The very least I could have done was give her the hope that someone cared about her in her last moments of life, that I would rather die with her rather than alone in my cowardice. Instead, I simply stared as she was eaten. Then it was my turn. The memory shuddered, sepia tone spilling across my view. The rest of the figures slithered away into my peripheries, ground vaulting upwards into utter darkness. In the void, only the dog and I remained, its hot breath curling from every side. Death and I suddenly had all the time in the world. Its claws softly clacked across the black mirror-sheen floor, teeth dripping with flesh and muddied saliva. It had no eyes that I could see, but I could still feel its gaze. It had no hurry to the way it walked. My arm felt the first blow as I threw it up to protect myself from the blurring form. Coarse fur lacerated my face as its head snapped around the limb, teeth slashing straight through and into each other. I rolled across the floor as it thrashed violently, tearing the limb off and swallowing it whole. My vision blurred and jittered, veins stopping up with black ooze as the boiling saliva reacted with the red blood. My legs were next to disappear from view, the creature's eyes opening inches from mine as its jowls pressure-cleaved my body in half. Blood squirted from my panicked heart onto its fur. Its eyes rolled back in its head like a shark. Glinting silver. The world tumbled past me in a whirlwind as the creature threw me aside. My body squelched beneath me, perception snapping back from the black void into straight reality. Dirt, gore, and organs surrounded my twisted vision, muffled screams and thunderous footsteps continuing all around me. But one figure stood directly overhead, life draining from their eyes as they watched what was left of my body sully the ground. Her silver eyes were constricted into mortified pinpricks, heels splattered with my blood. Her hand shook uncontrollably, gaze flashing around in a desperate search for help. But she was all alone. abandoned. Her flask dropped beside me, her hands frantically shaking through items in her purse before she found what she was looking for. The gun was heavy in her hand, though the way she brought it up to her temple implied she knew exactly what she was doing. The fear behind her eyes was hardly new, the way her finger rested on the trigger leading me to the sickening realization that she was someone who had tried many times before to pull the trigger. A howl emanated in the distance. A mangled mound of flesh stumbled closer, trying to hold its neck closed before crashing to the ground in front of me. Another corpse bowled past, equally shredded. Haze didn't take a last breath, didn't take one last look up at the sky, didn't even blink, before deafening percussion shattered the air. Her head exploded to the side, hand falling limp as both her and the gun crashed to the ground. And that's when the fire started. I was suddenly very aware of the billowing smoke overhead, blinding firelight crackling with energy in my peripheries. "This way," a commanding voice spoke overhead, several blurry figures passing in the distance. Without oxygen, my vision was decaying faster than my consciousness, everything fading to a dark gray, before a sudden new shape stopped overhead and leaned down slowly. Dark, almost crimson eyes came into view, lab coat softly billowing in the wind. A bloody name tag read, Dr. Cleo Dahmer. The eyes scanned me and the other corpses up and down before hastily moving on. Darkness crept over me.